Emma had always known her husband, Tom, was a quiet man, reserved and sometimes distant, but she never thought much of it. They had a good life, a nice house in the countryside, and the love between them was undeniable. At least, that's what she thought. The house had its quirks: creaking floors, the old pipes that sometimes moan at night, the faint smell of dampness in the basement. But the one thing that always caught Emma's attention was the cellar. It wasn't just because it was locked. Every house has a room you're not supposed to go into, but the cellar felt different. There was a chill to it. Tom never liked to talk about it. Whenever Emma asked, he would just give a vague excuse, saying it was for storage, or that it was too damp to keep anything valuable in there. But lately, Emma had been noticing things that didn't add up. Tom would disappear for hours, always saying he was working late or running errands. And when he was home, there were strange noises, scraping sounds, muffled cries that sounded too human to be the wind. Emma tried to ignore them, chalking them up to the old house settling. But there was a nagging feeling at the back of her mind, one that whispered to her in the dead of night. It was on one of those nights that she first heard the voices. Had woken up, her mind half formed from sleep, when she heard the faintest sound whimpering. It came from the cellar, so quiet, so soft, but unmistakably human. She sat up in bed, her heart racing. Had Tom been downstairs? Was he hurting someone? The sound continued for a few moments, and then silence. That was the moment she decided she had to know what was going on. Emma waited until Tom was out of the house on one of his errands before she made her move. She had to know what was in that cellar, what he was hiding. She found the key hidden in his study, locked away in a drawer, just as she had suspected. Her hands trembled as she held it, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. With the key in hand, she approached the cellar door. She inserted it into the lock, turning it slowly. The door creaked open, the musty smell of damp earth filling her nostrils. She stepped inside, the light from the hallway barely illuminating the space. It was darker than she had expected to dark. She reached for the light switch, but hesitated, and no idea what was waiting for her in that darkness. Still, she flicked the switch. The cellar light buzzed to life, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The walls were lined with old chains. Hooks hung from the rafters, and in the corner of the room, there was a blood-stained chair. Its cushions torn, the fabric ripped apart by some unknown force. The floor was littered with scraps of old clothing and broken tools, many of them stained dark red. And then Emma saw them, small, crumpled forms hidden behind a row of barrels. She approached slowly, her heart racing, her mind reeling with disbelief. When she reached the piles, she stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. There, slumped in the corner, were 3 people. Their faces were gaunt, their bodies bruised and battered. They barely looked alive. One of them, a man, whimpered weakly, his hands bound behind him with thick ropes. The other 2, a woman and a young man, were motionless, their eyes wide open in a frozen stare. Emma screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the thick walls of the cellar. She ran back toward the stairs, her body trembling with horror. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. Her husband, Tom, had done this. He was a monster. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps from above. Tom was home. Panicked, Emma ran toward the back door, but before she could reach it, she froze. Tom was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face blank and cold. He had known. Of course, he had known she would find out. "Emma," he said, his voice calm to calm. "I was hoping you wouldn't have to see this." Her heart thudded in her chest, her legs trembling beneath her. You did this?" she whispered, unable to comprehend the full extent of the horror before her. He smiled, but it was an empty, dead smile. "I didn't want to, but sometimes people just need to be taught a lesson." He stepped forward, the glint of something sharp in his hand. A large knife, blood-stained and gleaming in the dim light. Emma backed away slowly, her breath quick and shallow. No, please, Tom, you've seen too much," he said, his voice soft and steady, as though they were talking about something mundane. "You know too much now. You shouldn't have come down here, but I'll make sure you don't tell anyone." She turned to run, but Tom was too quick. He grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the chair in the center of the room. She struggled, but he was too strong. "Let go of me," she screamed, finally able to speak. But it was no use. He shoved her into the chair, securing her wrists with the same chains he had used on his victims. She was trapped. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the broken people in the corner, their hollow eyes staring back at her in silent pleading. She was going to die here, and she knew it. But then something inside Emma snapped. She wasn't going to die like this. She wouldn't let him win. With every ounce of strength she had left, she kicked her foot back into Tom's shin, sending him stumbling. He growled in frustration, but Emma didn't stop. She kicked again, this time hitting him in the groin. He cursed, falling backward. Emma's heart raced as she pulled against the chains, trying to break free. Her mind raced, trying to think of a way out. She could hear Tom getting up, his footsteps thundering toward her, but she was almost free. One final tug, and the chain snapped. She leapt to her feet, adrenaline surging through her body. She turned and bolted toward the door, but Tom caught her arm once more, dragging her back toward the cellar. With one final desperate move, Emma grabbed the blood-stained knife that had fallen from Tom's hand and plunged it into his chest. His eyes went wide with shock as he fell backward, choking on his own blood. But Emma didn't stop. She ran. She ran until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. She ran until she was free. Hours later, when the police arrived, they found the cellar. They found Tom lifeless and the broken bodies of his victims. They found Emma bloodied but alive, and they took her to safety. But the horror would never leave her. The memories of what she had seen, the pain, the suffering, the twisted things Tom had done would haunt her forever. And sometimes, in the quiet moments of the night, she could still hear the faint sound of chains scraping against the floor. And she knew deep down that Tom had been watching her the entire time.